The sound of a shovel striking hard earth split the morning air as Catherine Zimmerman watched the undertaker finish his grim work. Her husband's body had been lowered into the ground just an hour earlier, and now only a small mound of freshly turned soil marked where Thomas had been laid to rest. Widow at 24, the thought struck her with such force that her knees nearly buckled. She gripped her black mourning dress with trembling fingers, refusing to give in to the despair that threatened to consume her. Montana Territory, 1876. The promise of a new life had brought them west 3 years ago. Now she stood alone, the wind whipping across the makeshift cemetery on the outskirts of Silver Creek. "Mrs. Zimmerman," the undertaker said, removing his hat, "it's done now. Can I escort you back to town?" "No," Catherine replied, her voice stronger than she felt. "I'll stay a while longer." The man nodded respectfully and gathered his tools. Catherine barely noticed him leave. Her mind replayed the nightmare of the past week, Thomas's cough that had worsened into fever, the doctor's grim expression, and finally, the moment when her husband of 5 years had drawn his last breath. The small ranch they'd built together sat 3 miles outside of town. Catherine hadn't decided what she would do with it yet. They'd had no children, no family in the territory. Thomas's death from pneumonia had been swift and cruel. "Madam, it's going to rain soon." Catherine turned, startled by the deep voice behind her. A tall man stood several paces away, respectfully keeping his distance. She hadn't heard him approach. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy, worn boots, faded denims, a simple shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. His presence was unexpected but not threatening. "I don't mind the rain," she answered, turning back to the grave. The stranger stepped forward, still maintaining a respectful distance. "I knew your husband. Not well, but we rode together once, driving cattle from Helena. He spoke of you often." Catherine studied him more carefully now. His face was tanned and weathered from years under the sun, but his eyes were kind. There was something in his expression, not pity, which she had come to hate in the past days, but understanding. "You have me at a disadvantage, sir," she said. "Isaac Garrett, madam. Most folks just call me Ike." He removed his hat, revealing dark hair streaked with premature silver at the temples. "I was passing through when I heard about Thomas. I'm mighty sorry for your loss." A few drops of rain began to fall, cool against Catherine's skin. She barely noticed. "Thank you, Mr. Garrett." "The storm's coming in fast. Do you have a way back to town?" he asked. Catherine glanced toward the hitching post where her mare waited. "I have my horse." The sky darkened as clouds gathered overhead. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and sage. Thunder rumbled in the distance. "I'll ride with you if you don't mind," Isaac said. "These storms can turn nasty quick." Catherine's first instinct was to refuse. She'd spent the past days accepting help from well-meaning townspeople, enduring their sympathetic glances, their whispered comments about poor Mrs. Zimmerman when they thought she couldn't hear, but there was something straightforward about this man's offer that didn't feel like charity. "Very well," she said with a nod. They walked to their horses in silence. The rain began to fall more steadily, large drops tapping against Catherine's black bonnet. As they mounted, the heavens opened and the rain came down in earnest. "This way," Isaac called over the downpour, gesturing toward a stand of cottonwoods. "There's an old line shack about half a mile from here. We can wait out the worst of it." Catherine hesitated only briefly before following him. They rode quickly through the rain, her black mourning dress already soaked through. By the time they reached the small wooden structure, they were both drenched. The line shack was crude but solid, a single room with a small iron stove, a rough-hewn table, and a narrow cot. Isaac quickly started a fire while Catherine stood awkwardly near the door, water pooling at her feet. "Here," he said, pulling a worn but clean blanket from his saddlebag. "You should get out of those wet clothes before you catch your death." He immediately looked away. "I mean, I can step outside while you—" "It's fine," Catherine interrupted. "Just turn around." Isaac turned to face the wall while Catherine stripped off her sodden outer garments, wrapping the blanket around herself. Her chemise and underskirts remained damp but not soaked through. "You can turn back now," she said, sitting on the edge of the cot. Isaac busied himself with the fire, adding more kindling until it blazed warmly. Outside, the rain lashed against the small window and thunder boomed overhead. "Should pass quickly," he said, hanging his wet coat near the stove. "These spring storms usually do." Catherine nodded absently, staring into the flames. The past week had left her numb, moving through the rituals of death and burial like a sleepwalker. Now, stranded in this tiny cabin with a virtual stranger, she felt oddly disconnected from her grief, as if she had stepped outside herself. "Did you know Thomas well?" she asked suddenly. Isaac settled into the room's only chair. "We worked together for about 3 weeks. Good man, honest, talked about you constantly, how smart you were, how brave to come out west with him." Catherine's throat tightened. "He was a dreamer. Always had big plans. He mentioned you were a teacher back east, in Pennsylvania." "Yes," she looked at him curiously. "He told you that?" Isaac smiled slightly. "Like I said, he talked about you a lot, proud of having such an educated wife." The simple observation broke something inside her. Tears welled in her eyes, the first she had allowed herself since Thomas had died. She turned away, embarrassed by the display. "Mrs. Zimmerman," Isaac said softly, "you don't have to be brave tonight." Catherine's shoulders shook as the sobs finally came. All the grief she had held at bay during the funeral arrangements, the polite condolences, the burial, it crashed over her now like a wave. She cried for Thomas, for the future they would never have, for the children they had planned but never conceived. Isaac remained quiet, simply stoking the fire and giving her the dignity of her grief. When her tears finally subsided, he wordlessly handed her a handkerchief. "Thank you," she whispered, wiping her eyes. "I'm sorry for..." "Don't apologize," he interrupted gently. "Grief demands its due." The rain continued to pound against the roof, but the thunder had moved on, rumbling distantly. Catherine studied this unexpected companion. He was older than she had first thought, perhaps in his mid-30s, with lines at the corners of his eyes that deepened when he spoke. "Are you passing through Silver Creek, Mr. Garrett?" she asked, gathering her composure. "Call me Isaac, please," he nodded. "Just passing through. I've been working ranches between here and Wyoming, thought I might find work at the Blackwater spread." "The Crawfords," Catherine supplied. "They own the largest ranch in the county. They're always hiring good hands." The conversation lapsed into silence again, but it was not uncomfortable. The fire crackled in the stove and the rain began to lessen. Catherine felt her clothes drying in the warmth. "What will you do now?" Isaac asked carefully. It was the question she had been avoiding. "I don't know, the ranch is mine, but..." She trailed off. They both knew a woman alone would struggle to maintain even a small cattle operation. "I could sell it, go back east to my sister in Philadelphia." "Is that what you want?" Catherine considered the question seriously. "No," she admitted. "This is home now, but I'm not sure how to keep it." Isaac nodded thoughtfully. "Your husband struck me as a man who chose his path carefully. He must have seen something in this territory worth building on." "He saw the future," Catherine said softly. "He always could." The rain finally stopped, leaving behind that peculiar freshness that follows a storm. Isaac stood and checked outside. "Looks clear enough to ride now," he said. "We should get you home before dark." They retrieved their damp outer clothing. Catherine's morning dress was still wet, but the worst of it had dried by the fire. As she prepared to leave, she found herself reluctant to return to the empty ranch house and all the decisions waiting there. "Thank you," she said as they mounted their horses, "for your kindness today." Isaac tipped his hat. "Just being neighborly, madam." They rode in companionable silence, the landscape washed clean by the rain. The setting sun broke through the clouds, bathing the hills in golden light. Catherine had forgotten how beautiful this country could be. "Your ranch is up this way?" Isaac asked as they approached a fork in the road. "Yes, just beyond that rise." She hesitated. Would you care to stop for some coffee? It's the least I can offer after you escorted me." Something flickered in Isaac's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or hesitation. "I wouldn't want to impose." "It's no imposition," Catherine assured him. "In fact, I'd welcome the company. The house has been quiet." After a moment, Isaac nodded. "Coffee would be welcome, thank you." The small ranch house came into view as they crested the hill. It wasn't much, a sturdy log structure with a porch across the front, a barn, and a corral, but it represented everything Catherine and Thomas had worked for. They dismounted, and Isaac saw to the horses while Catherine unlocked the door. Inside, the house felt unnaturally still. Catherine moved automatically, lighting lamps and stoking the banked coals in the stove. The familiar actions helped settle her nerves. When Isaac entered, wiping his boots on the threshold, she was already putting the coffee pot on to boil. "This is a fine place," he said, looking around the tidy main room with its simple furnishings. Bookshelves lined one wall, Catherine's contribution to their home. "Thomas built most of it himself," she said. "We started with just a one-room cabin." Isaac removed his hat, holding it respectfully. "He did good work." The coffee began to perk, and Catherine busied herself with cups and a tin of sugar. The domestic routine felt strange after the intensity of the day. "How long have you been riding the territory?" she asked, needing to fill the silence. "Going on 15 years now," Isaac replied, accepting the steaming cup she offered. "Started as a trail hand in Texas, worked my way north. No family," a shadow crossed his face. "Had a wife once in Kansas. Yellow fever took her our second year married." "I'm sorry," Catherine said, recognizing the old grief in his voice. "It was a long time ago, 1866. He sipped his coffee. "You get used to carrying it after a while." The simple honesty of his words resonated with her. "Does it get easier?" she asked quietly. Isaac considered the question seriously. "Not easier, different, less raw. You learn to live alongside it." They sat at the kitchen table, the lamplight casting soft shadows. Outside, night had fallen completely, and the familiar sounds of the ranch cattle lowing in the distance, the whisper of wind in the cottonwoods drifted through the open window. "I should be going," Isaac said eventually, finishing his coffee. "I've imposed long enough." "It's late," Catherine said, surprising herself. "And town is a fair ride. You're welcome to use the barn for the night." Isaac studied her face carefully. "People might talk. People always talk," she replied with unexpected bitterness. "Besides, there's nothing improper about offering shelter to a traveler." After a moment's consideration, Isaac nodded. "Thank you, I'll be gone at first light." Catherine showed him to the barn, providing blankets and a lantern. As she turned to leave, Isaac called after her softly, "Mrs. Zimmerman." She paused in the doorway. "Your husband was right about you being brave." Catherine didn't respond, but his words followed her back to the empty house. That night, lying in the bed she had shared with Thomas, Catherine stared at the ceiling and realized she had spent hours without crying. The grief was still there, a hollow ache in her chest, but something had shifted. Perhaps it was simply having spoken to someone who understood loss, who didn't offer platitudes or unwanted advice. In the morning, she woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of chopping wood. Dressing quickly, she stepped onto the porch to find Isaac stacking split logs beside the house. "You didn't have to do that," she said. He straightened, wiping his brow. "Seemed like the least I could do for the hospitality." He gestured toward the kitchen. "Coffee's hot." Catherine poured 2 cups and brought one out to him. They stood on the porch, watching the sun rise over the eastern hills. "I'll be heading to the Crawford place today," Isaac said. "If they hire me on, I'd be in the area." Catherine nodded, understanding the unspoken offer. "I'd appreciate it if you'd stop by sometime. I could use advice about running this place." "I'd be happy to," he replied, finishing his coffee. "Thank you again for your kindness, Mrs. Zimmerman." "Catherine," she corrected. "Please call me Catherine." Isaac mounted his horse, tipping his hat to her. "Good day, Catherine." She watched him ride away, a solitary figure against the vast landscape. For the first time since Thomas's death, she felt something other than grief, a small spark of determination. Whatever came next, she would face it. The next week passed in a blur of activity. Catherine threw herself into the work of the ranch, tending to the small herd of cattle, mending fences, and taking inventory of their supplies. Physical exhaustion kept the worst of her grief at bay during the days, though the nights remained difficult. On the 8th day after the funeral, Catherine rode into Silver Creek for supplies. The small town consisted of little more than a main street with the essential businesses general store, saloon, smithy, and a modest church. As she tied her horse outside the general store, she was aware of the sidelong glances and hushed conversations that followed her. Mrs. Zimmerman, Mrs. Porter, the storekeeper's wife, greeted her. "How are you faring, dear?" "Well enough, thank you," Catherine replied, placing her list on the counter. "We've all been so worried," the older woman continued, gathering the requested items. "A woman alone out there. It's not safe, you know." Catherine had heard variations of this concern repeatedly. "I'm managing," she said firmly. "Harold Simmons was asking after you," Mrs. Porter said with practiced casualness. "He mentioned he might be interested in buying your place should you decide to sell." Catherine tensed. Harold Simmons owned the bank and had been trying to acquire their land for years, seeing its potential for expansion. Thomas had always refused his offers. "I'm not selling," she said. Mrs. Porter clucked disapprovingly. "Pride won't feed you come winter, dear." Catherine paid for her supplies and left quickly, her good mood evaporated. Outside, she nearly collided with a familiar figure. "Isaac," she said, surprised. He smiled, touching the brim of his hat. "Catherine, good to see you." In the daylight, he looked different, less mysterious than he had that rainy day by the grave. His dark hair was neatly combed and he'd shaved. He was not conventionally handsome, but there was a steadiness to his features that Catherine found appealing. "Did you find work with the Crawfords?" she asked. "I did. Hired on as a foreman last week." He gestured to her parcels. "Can I help you with those?" Catherine accepted his assistance and they walked together toward her horse. "How are you holding up at the ranch?" Isaac asked. "Well enough, though I'm finding there's more work than hours in the day," she admitted. "And it seems the vultures are already circling." Isaac frowned. "Trouble? Harold Simmons from the bank. He's been after our land for years." She sighed. "He thinks I'll sell now that Thomas is gone." "Will you?" "No," she said firmly. "But I'm not naive about the challenges. Winter will be difficult without help." Isaac secured her packages to the saddle. "I could ride out tomorrow, take a look at what needs doing. The Crawfords give me Sundays off." Catherine hesitated only briefly. "I'd appreciate that." As they stood beside her horse, Catherine became aware of the stares from passers-by. Isaac noticed too. "Don't mind them," he said quietly. "Small towns run on gossip." "I don't care what they think," Catherine replied, though part of her did. She had always been conscious of propriety, even in the less formal atmosphere of the West. Isaac helped her mount. "Tomorrow, then, around midday." "I'll have dinner waiting," she promised, suddenly looking forward to the next day. True to his word, Isaac arrived the following day just as the sun reached its zenith. Catherine had spent the morning cleaning the house and preparing a more elaborate meal than she had bothered with since Thomas's death: venison stew, fresh bread, and an apple pie made from preserved fruit. Isaac brought his own tools and immediately set to work repairing the corral fence that had been listing dangerously. Catherine worked alongside him, handing him nails and holding boards in place. They fell into an easy rhythm, and she found herself talking more than she had in weeks. "Thomas and I came west after reading an article about Montana Territory in the newspaper," she told him as they worked. "Everyone thought we were crazy to leave Pennsylvania." "What made you decide to come?" Catherine smiled at the memory. "Thomas said he wanted to build something that would last. He was tired of working in his father's mercantile, following someone else's dreams." "And you, what brought you west?" "I loved him," she said simply, "but I also loved the idea of starting fresh." Teaching in Philadelphia was rewarding, but constraining in many ways. They finished the repairs and moved on to checking the small irrigation system Thomas had devised for their vegetable garden. The work was satisfying, and Catherine realized she was enjoying herself despite the underlying sadness that never quite left her. When dinner time came, they washed up at the outdoor pump and settled at the kitchen table. Isaac complimented her cooking with genuine appreciation. "This is the best meal I've had in months," he said, accepting a second helping of stew. The Crawford Ranch cook believes in quantity over quality. Catherine found herself laughing for the first time since Thomas's death. "I confess I'm out of practice. I've barely been eating lately." Isaac's expression grew serious. "Grief can steal your appetite, but you need your strength. I know." She pushed a piece of venison around her plate. "It's just hard to remember why it matters sometimes." "It matters because you're still here," Isaac said gently. "And I suspect your husband would want you to keep living, not just surviving." Catherine looked up, meeting his steady gaze. There was no judgment there, only understanding. "You're right, of course." After dinner, they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains. Isaac rolled a cigarette, asking her permission before lighting it. "What will you do with the ranch?" he asked after a comfortable silence. Catherine had been pondering this question for days. "Keep it running if I can. We have 37 head of cattle, not many, but it's a start." Thomas was planning to buy more this year. Isaac nodded thoughtfully. "You'll need help with the roundup and branding." "I know. I've been thinking of hiring one of the Crawford hands part-time if I can afford it." "I could help," Isaac offered, "on my days off. And I know some trustworthy men who might work for a fair wage." Catherine studied him, wondering about his motives. "Why would you do that?" Isaac took a long draw on his cigarette before answering. "When my wife died, I was lost, drank too much, took foolish risks. An old rancher named Everett took me in, gave me work, purpose." He met her eyes. "Sometimes all a person needs is a chance to get back on their feet." His honesty touched her. "Thank you, I'd welcome the help." As the light faded, Isaac stood to leave. "I should head back to the Crawford place." "Early start tomorrow." "Will you come again next Sunday?" Catherine asked, surprised by how much she wanted him to say yes. Isaac smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. "I'd like that." Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged. Isaac would arrive every Sunday, help with the most pressing repairs and ranch work, and share the evening meal with Catherine before riding back to the Crawford Ranch. Occasionally, he would stop by midweek if his duties allowed, bringing news from town or lending a hand with a particular task. Catherine found herself looking forward to these visits with increasing eagerness. Isaac was unfailingly respectful, never overstepping the boundaries of propriety, yet there was a growing ease between them. He listened when she spoke of Thomas, sharing occasional stories of his own wife, Sarah. There was no awkwardness in these conversations, just the mutual recognition of shared experience. Spring gave way to early summer, and the ranch began to thrive under their combined efforts. Isaac brought 2 reliable hands from the Crawford place who were willing to work their days off for fair pay. The small herd increased with the spring calving, and Catherine began to believe that self-sufficiency might be possible. One hot July Sunday, Isaac arrived with news. "Cattle buyers from Helena will be at the Crawford place next week," he said as they sat on the porch after a day's work. "They're paying good prices. You might consider selling some of your steers." Catherine nodded thoughtfully. "We could use the money. The roof needs replacing before winter." "I could speak to them on your behalf," Isaac offered. "Save you the trip." "Thank you, but I should go myself," Catherine replied. "I need to learn every aspect of the business if I'm going to make this work." Isaac's smile held approval. "You're doing well, you know. Better than most men would in your situation." His praise warmed her. "I couldn't have managed without your help." The evening air was sweet with the scent of wildflowers. Fireflies had begun to appear near the creek, their lights blinking in the gathering dusk. Catherine was acutely aware of Isaac's presence beside her, his strong profile, the careful way he chose his words, the respect he had shown her from the beginning. "Isaac," she said suddenly, "why did you come to the cemetery that day?" He looked surprised by the question. I told you I knew Thomas barely by your own account, she interrupted gently. And you said you were just passing through. It seems an unusual detour. Isaac was silent for a long moment. Truth is, I heard about his passing in town, remembered him as a good man. Thought someone should pay respects, he paused. When I saw you standing there alone, I know what that's like. Catherine reached out impulsively and touched his hand. I'm glad you did. Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, a recognition of the connection that had been building over these months. Isaac glanced down at her hand on his, then carefully turned his palm upward to hold her fingers. Catherine, he began, his voice low. She felt a flush rising to her cheeks and gently withdrew her hand. It's getting late. Isaac nodded, accepting her retreat. I should go. As he stood to leave, Catherine felt a pang of regret. Will you come for the Independence Day celebration in town next week? The whole county will be there. Would you like me to? Yes, she said simply. His smile was answer enough. The 4th of July celebration in Silver Creek was the social event of the summer. The tiny town swelled with visitors from outlying ranches and neighboring settlements. There would be horse races, contests of skill, a community picnic, and dancing under the stars. Catherine spent more time than usual preparing, washing her hair with rosemary water and laying out her best dress, a blue calico that had been too cheerful for her mourning period, but now felt appropriate. She had been a widow for nearly 4 months, and while her grief remained, it had softened into something she could carry without being crushed by it. She rode into town early, bringing pies for the community table. The main street was festooned with bunting and American flags, and a makeshift bandstand had been erected in the vacant lot beside the church. Children ran about excitedly, and the atmosphere was festive. Catherine was arranging her pies on the long table when Mrs. Porter approached. Mrs. Zimmerman, you're looking well, the storekeeper's wife said, her eyes taking in the blue dress. It's good to see you out of mourning. Thank you, Catherine replied politely. I understand you've had help out at your place, Mrs. Porter continued, her tone deliberately casual. That new foreman from the Crawford Ranch, Catherine stiffened. Mr. Garrett has been kind enough to assist with repairs, yes. Mrs. Porter leaned closer. A word of advice, dear. People are talking. A young widow entertaining a man alone. It doesn't look right. Anger flared in Catherine's chest. Mr. Garrett is a friend who has helped me keep my ranch running. There's nothing improper about it. Of course not, Mrs. Porter said with false sympathy. But appearances matter, especially for a woman in your position. Before Catherine could respond, a familiar voice interrupted. Mrs. Porter, those pies look delicious. Your work? Isaac stood beside them, looking polished in a clean shirt and vest. His dark hair was combed neatly and he had trimmed his beard. His expression was pleasant, but his eyes held a warning as he looked at the older woman. My apple pies are quite famous, Mrs. Porter said, flustered by his sudden appearance. I'm sure they are, Isaac replied with a tight smile. If you'll excuse us, I promised Mrs. Zimmerman I'd show her the shooting contest preparations. He offered Catherine his arm, which she took gratefully. As they walked away, she let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Thank you for the rescue, she murmured. Isaac's expression was troubled. I heard what she said. I'm sorry if my visits have caused gossip. Don't be, Catherine said firmly. I won't let small-minded people dictate my life. His eyes searched hers. Still, I wouldn't want to damage your reputation. My reputation is intact, she assured him. And your friendship has meant more to me than I can say. The tension in his face eased. In that case, would you do me the honor of saving me a dance tonight? Catherine smiled. I'd like that very much. The day passed in a whirl of activity. Isaac participated in the shooting contest and the bronc riding, acquitting himself well in both. Catherine found herself cheering for him alongside the other spectators, enjoying the simple pleasure of the celebration. As evening approached, lanterns were lit around the dancing area and the band tuned their instruments. Catherine felt a flutter of nervous anticipation. She hadn't danced since before Thomas's death and never with Isaac. He found her as the first dance was announced, looking somewhat uncertain. "I'm not much of a dancer," he admitted, "but I'd be honored if you'd partner with me anyway." Catherine took his offered hand. "I'll lead then," she said with a smile. The music began a lively reel that had couples lining up in 2 rows. Isaac proved better than he claimed, following the steps with reasonable accuracy. When he occasionally faltered, Catherine guided him subtly, and his grateful smile made her heart beat faster. As they moved through the patterns of the dance, Catherine was acutely aware of his hand in hers, the careful way he placed his other hand at her waist when the figures brought them together. There was a respect in his touch that spoke volumes. The night grew cooler as more dances followed. During a break, Isaac brought Catherine a cup of punch and they stood at the edge of the dancing area watching the celebrations. "Are you enjoying yourself?" he asked. "More than I expected to," she admitted. "It feels good to be among people again." Isaac nodded. "You've been isolated too long." "It was necessary, I think. The grief needed space." She looked up at him. "But you helped me find my way back." His expression softened. "You did that yourself. You're stronger than you know, Catherine." The band struck up a waltz and Isaac held out his hand. "One more dance." Catherine stepped into his arms and they began to move with the music. The waltz was more intimate than the group dances, requiring them to stay close. Isaac's hand was warm against her back, and she could smell the clean scent of soap and leather that she had come to associate with him. "People are watching," she murmured, noticing the glances from the townspeople. "Let them," Isaac replied quietly. "We're doing nothing wrong." As they turned with the music, Catherine caught sight of Harold Simmons watching them with obvious disapproval. The banker had continued to pressure her about selling the ranch, growing increasingly frustrated with her refusals. "Mr. Simmons looks unhappy," she observed. Isaac glanced in the banker's direction. "He's been trying to buy up land all over the county. I hear he's working with the railroad." The music drew to a close and they separated reluctantly. Catherine was about to suggest they take a walk when Harold Simmons approached, his expression fixed in a tight smile. "Mrs. Zimmerman, you're looking well," he said, ignoring Isaac completely. "I was hoping we might discuss business." "This isn't the time, Mr. Simmons," Catherine replied coolly. "On the contrary, it may be the perfect time," Simmons persisted. "I've increased my offer for your property by 20%. It's more than generous." Isaac stepped forward slightly. "The lady said this isn't the time." Simmons finally acknowledged him with a dismissive glance. "This is a private business matter, Cowboy." "It's all right, Isaac," Catherine said, placing a calming hand on his arm. To Simmons, she said firmly, "My answer remains the same. The ranch is not for sale at any price." The banker's facade of pleasantness slipped. "Be reasonable, Mrs. Zimmerman. A woman alone can't maintain a cattle operation. You're facing financial ruin by winter." "That's my concern, not yours," Catherine replied, keeping her voice even despite her rising anger. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we were enjoying the celebration." Simmons's face hardened. "You might want to consider your position more carefully. Banks have ways of calling in loans when borrowers seem unstable." Isaac tensed beside her. "Is that a threat, Simmons?" "Merely an observation about business realities," the banker replied smoothly. "Good evening, Mrs. Zimmerman. Do think on my offer." As Simmons walked away, Catherine released a shaky breath. "He's becoming more aggressive." "Do you have loans with his bank?" Isaac asked, concerned. "A small mortgage Thomas took to buy the initial herd," she confirmed. "But we've made every payment on time." Isaac's expression was troubled. "Be careful. Men like Simmons don't give up easily when they want something." The encounter had cast a shadow over the evening. Catherine suggested they leave the dance, and Isaac walked her to where her horse was tethered. "I don't like the way he spoke to you," Isaac said as they reached her mare. "Simmons has a reputation for getting what he wants one way or another. What can he do?" "The mortgage is in good standing and the ranch is legally mine." Isaac helped her mount. "Just watch yourself and let me know if he bothers you again." Catherine looked down at him, touched by his concern. Will you come tomorrow? There's something I'd like to discuss with you." "Of course," he promised. Mid-morning, she nodded, suddenly reluctant to leave him. "Good night, Isaac. Good night, Catherine. Be safe riding home." The next morning, Catherine was up early preparing for Isaac's visit. She had spent a restless night considering a proposal that had been forming in her mind for weeks. The encounter with Simmons had only strengthened her resolve. When Isaac arrived, she had coffee waiting and fresh bread baking in the oven. They sat at the kitchen table and Catherine gathered her courage. "I've been thinking about the ranch," she began, "and about your situation at the Crawford place." Isaac waited, giving her time to continue. "You've been incredibly helpful these past months. Without you, I might have had to sell to Simmons already." She took a deep breath. "I'd like to propose a formal arrangement, a partnership of sorts." Isaac's eyebrows rose in surprise. "What kind of partnership? You would leave the Crawford Ranch and come work here full-time." "We would split the profits after expenses." She hurried on. "The cabin behind the barn could be fixed up as your quarters. It would be a business arrangement, completely proper." Isaac was silent for a long moment, considering her words. "That's generous, Catherine, but are you sure?" "Taking on a partner is a big step." "I've thought it through carefully," she assured him. "You know cattle and ranch management. I'm learning, but I need someone with experience. Together we could make this place profitable." "What about the town gossips?" he asked. "Having me living on your property would only fuel the talk." Catherine squared her shoulders. "Let them talk. This is a business decision and a smart one." Isaac studied her face. "Is it only business, Catherine?" The question hung between them, charged with unspoken meaning. Catherine felt her cheeks warm. "I value your friendship," she said carefully. "But yes, this would be a business arrangement." Something flickered in Isaac's eyes, disappointment perhaps, or resignation. "I appreciate the offer. Can I take some time to consider it?" "Of course," Catherine replied, trying to hide her own disappointment at his hesitation. "It's a big decision." They spent the rest of the day working together as usual, though there was a new undercurrent of tension between them. When evening came, Isaac declined her invitation to stay for dinner, citing work he needed to finish at the Crawford Ranch. As he rode away, Catherine wondered if she had made a mistake in proposing the partnership. Had she misread their growing connection? Or was Isaac simply being cautious, understanding the complications that might arise from their arrangement? 3 days passed without word from Isaac. Catherine tried to focus on her daily tasks, but worry nagged at her. Had she offended him, scared him away? The ranch seemed emptier without the anticipation of his visits. On the 4th day, Catherine was mending a broken harness on the porch when she saw a rider approaching. Her heart leapt, thinking it was Isaac, but as the figure drew closer, she realized it was Harold Simmons. She set aside her work and stood, bracing herself for another confrontation. Simmons dismounted and approached the porch, his manner all business. "Mrs. Zimmerman," he greeted her, "I hope I find you well." "What can I do for you, Mr. Simmons?" Catherine asked directly. The banker reached into his coat and withdrew an envelope. "I'm here on bank business. I'm afraid there's been a review of your mortgage." Catherine took the envelope with a sense of foreboding. Inside was a formal letter stating that due to reassessment of property values and risk factors, her monthly payment would increase by nearly 50%, effective immediately. "This is outrageous," she said, anger replacing her initial shock. The terms were clearly established in the original agreement. Simmons smiled thinly. "If you read the fine print, the bank reserves the right to adjust terms based on various factors. Your husband's death significantly altered the risk profile of the loan." "This is because I refuse to sell to you," Catherine said, her voice hard. "Business is business, Mrs. Zimmerman. Of course, if you reconsider my offer, this matter could be resolved immediately." Catherine's mind raced. The increased payment would strain her resources to the breaking point, especially with winter coming. It was a calculated move designed to force her hand. "Get off my property," she said quietly. Simmons's smile never wavered. "You have 30 days to make the new payment or face foreclosure." I suggest you consider your options carefully." He mounted his horse and tipped his hat mockingly. "Good day, Mrs. Zimmerman." Catherine watched him ride away, fury and fear battling within her. When he was out of sight, she sank onto the porch steps, the letter clutched in her hand. The unfairness of it struck her like a physical blow. After all her efforts to keep the ranch going, to honor Thomas's dream, she might lose everything because of one man's greed. She was still sitting there an hour later when another rider appeared. This time, it was Isaac. He took one look at her face and dismounted quickly, concern evident in his expression. "What's happened?" he asked, coming to sit beside her on the steps. Wordlessly, she handed him Simmons's letter. He read it, his jaw tightening with each line. "The bastard," he muttered. "This is because of the other night." "It's because I won't sell," Catherine corrected tiredly. "He wants this land for the railroad and he's determined to get it." Isaac handed the letter back. "Can you make the new payment?" "Not for long, maybe 2 or 3 months, then I'd be out of funds." She looked at him, desperation edging into her voice. "I can't lose this place, Isaac. It's all I have left of Thomas." Isaac was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking about your offer," he said finally. "The partnership." Hope flickered in Catherine's chest. "And?" "I'll do it," he said firmly. "But not as a hired hand or even a partner. I want to buy in properly. I've been saving my wages for years, planning to get my own place someday." He met her eyes steadily. "I have enough to pay off Simmons's bank completely." Catherine stared at him in shock. "You would do that?" "As a business investment, yes," Isaac said carefully. "We draw up proper papers, make everything legal. You'd still own the majority share, but I'd have a stake in the place. Simmons couldn't touch us then." It was more than Catherine had dared hope for. "Isaac, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he replied simply. "This is a good ranch with potential. Together we can make it work." Catherine studied his face, looking for any sign of ulterior motives, but saw only sincerity and determination. "Yes," she said finally. "Yes, I accept." Relief flooded Isaac's features. "We'll go to the lawyer in Helena tomorrow, get everything in writing, then we'll pay Simmons a visit he won't forget." For the first time since receiving the letter, Catherine smiled. "I'd like that very much." The next morning they rode to Helena together. The territorial capital was considerably larger than Silver Creek, with proper brick buildings and busy streets. They found a reputable lawyer who specialized in property matters and spent several hours drafting a formal partnership agreement. The terms were fair. Isaac would own 40% of the ranch in exchange for paying off the mortgage. They would share profits proportionally after expenses, and both would have say in major decisions. The lawyer assured them that once the mortgage was satisfied, Simmons would have no further claim on the property. With the agreement signed and notarized, they visited the Helena bank where Isaac had his savings. The teller was clearly surprised by the substantial withdrawal, but processed it without question. By mid-afternoon, they were heading back toward Silver Creek with a bank draft for the full amount of the mortgage. "Are you sure about this?" Catherine asked as they rode. "It's your life savings." Isaac looked thoughtful. "I've been saving for a place of my own for years. Now I'll have one, even if it's shared." "It's a risk," she pointed out. "The ranch isn't guaranteed to succeed." "Few things in life are guaranteed," he replied, "but I believe in this place and in you." His simple statement warmed her. They rode in companionable silence for a while. The beauty of the Montana landscape spread around them, rolling hills, stands of pine and aspen, and in the distance, the blue shadows of mountains. "When my wife died," Isaac said suddenly, "I thought I'd never feel at home anywhere again. I've been drifting for 10 years, working other men's land, never putting down roots." Catherine glanced at him, sensing the importance of what he was sharing. "And now I'm ready to stop drifting." His eyes met hers briefly. "This is about more than a business arrangement for me, Catherine. I should be honest about that." Her heart quickened at his words. "It is for me, too," she admitted softly. They reached Silver Creek by late afternoon and rode directly to the bank. Harold Simmons was clearly surprised to see them, his self-satisfied expression faltering slightly as they entered his office. Mrs. Zimmerman, Mr. Garrett, what can I do for you? He asked, gesturing to the chairs before his desk. We've come to settle my mortgage, Mr. Simmons, Catherine said, unable to keep a note of triumph from her voice. Simmons raised an eyebrow. The full amount, that's quite a sum. Isaac placed the bank draft on the desk. That should cover it with interest. The banker stared at the draft, then looked up sharply. What's going on here? Mr. Garrett and I have formed a partnership, Catherine explained. He has purchased an interest in my ranch and is using his investment to clear the mortgage. Simmons's face darkened. This is highly irregular. There are procedures, paperwork, all handled by lawyer Thornton in Helena, Isaac interrupted. Everything's legal and binding. The deed will remain in both our names, free and clear. Simmons picked up the bank draft, examining it as if hoping to find it fraudulent. Finding nothing amiss, his mouth thinned to a hard line. I'll need to verify this with the Helena Bank, he said stiffly. By all means, Catherine replied. In the meantime, I believe you have mortgage release papers to prepare. Defeated, Simmons summoned his clerk and began the process of releasing the mortgage. His barely concealed anger was a stark contrast to the elation Catherine felt rising within her. They had won this round decisively. An hour later, they emerged from the bank with the mortgage papers marked "paid in full" and a receipt for the transaction. The late afternoon sun bathed the street in golden light as they walked to their horses. I don't think I've ever seen a man look so disappointed to receive money, Isaac remarked, a hint of amusement in his voice. Catherine laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. Thank you, Isaac, for everything. He touched her arm gently. Partners look out for each other. The word partners held new meaning now, encompassing more than just their business arrangement. As they mounted their horses to return to their ranch now, Catherine felt a sense of possibility that had been missing since Thomas's death. The following weeks brought significant changes to the ranch. Isaac moved his belongings into the repaired cabin behind the barn, and they established a routine of shared work and responsibilities. With Isaac's expertise, they expanded the herd, purchasing additional cattle from a rancher who was retiring and moving east. Catherine found herself enjoying the new dynamic. There was comfort in sharing decisions, in having someone to consult about the daily challenges of ranch life. Isaac respected her opinions and never made her feel less capable because she was a woman, something rare in the Montana territory. As summer gave way to early autumn, they began preparing for the coming winter. Isaac supervised the construction of additional shelter for the cattle, while Catherine preserved the garden's harvest and calculated their supply needs for the cold months ahead. One crisp October evening, they sat on the porch after dinner, discussing plans for the following day. The air was cool enough to require jackets, and the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. Jenkins says there's a storm coming from the north, Isaac said, referring to one of their part-time hands. Might bring the first snow. Catherine nodded, pulling her shawl closer around her shoulders. It feels like it. The air has that sharpness. They fell into comfortable silence, watching as more stars emerged. It had become their habit to spend evenings like this, sharing the day's events and planning for tomorrow. Sometimes they would sit for hours, talking about their pasts or their hopes for the ranch's future. I've been thinking, Isaac said after a while, about building an addition to the main house, a proper office for the ranch business. That would be useful, Catherine agreed. The kitchen table is getting crowded with ledgers and correspondence. And perhaps expanding the barn come spring, he continued. If the herd continues to grow, we'll need more space. Catherine smiled at his use of we. It no longer sounded strange to her ears. In just a few months, they had become true partners in every sense except one. Isaac, she said suddenly, her heart racing, are you happy here? He looked surprised by the question. Of course, why do you ask? Sometimes I worry that you might regret your decision. Tying yourself to this place, to our arrangement. Isaac turned to face her fully. Catherine, joining you here was the best decision I've made in years. I have no regrets. In the dim light from the house windows, his expression was earnest and open. Catherine found herself studying the lines of his face, the strength in his features, the kindness in his eyes that had drawn her from the beginning. "When Thomas died," she said softly, "I thought my life was over. I couldn't imagine a future without him." She paused, gathering her courage. "I never expected to find this, whatever this is between us." Isaac's gaze held her steadily. "What do you want it to be?" The directness of his question took her breath away. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "I still carry Thomas with me. I always will." "I understand that," Isaac said gently. "I still carry Sarah, but I've learned that the heart has room for more than one love in a lifetime." The word love hung in the air between them. Catherine felt a flush rise to her cheeks, grateful for the darkness that hid it. "It's been less than a year," she said uncertainly. "Is it too soon?" Isaac reached out slowly and took her hand. His palm was warm against her chilled fingers. "There's no proper timetable for the heart, Catherine, but we can take all the time you need." The tenderness in his voice moved her deeply. Without overthinking, she leaned forward and pressed her lips softly to his. The kiss was brief, almost hesitant, but it sent a current of warmth through her entire body. When she pulled back, Isaac's expression was a mixture of surprise and wonder. He raised a hand to gently touch her cheek. "I've wanted to do that for months," he confessed. Catherine smiled, suddenly shy. "So have I." He kissed her this time, more confidently but still with gentle restraint. When they parted, Catherine felt dizzy with emotion, joy, fear, anticipation all mingled together. "We should probably take things slowly," she said, though part of her wanted nothing of the sort. Isaac nodded, his thumb brushing lightly across her knuckles. "We have time, Catherine, all the time we need." As if on cue, a cold wind gusted across the porch, making them both shiver. Isaac stood, still holding her hand. "It's getting cold, we should go in." Catherine rose, reluctant to end the moment but knowing it was only a beginning. "Good night, Isaac." He raised her hand to his lips, the gesture old-fashioned and courtly. "Good night, Catherine, sleep well." She watched him walk to his cabin, her emotions in a pleasant turmoil. For the first time since Thomas's death, she felt fully alive, with all the complexity that entailed the lingering grief for what was lost balanced against the hopeful anticipation of what might be. The predicted storm arrived during the night, bringing the first snow of the season, just a light dusting that melted by mid-morning, but a harbinger of the winter to come. Catherine and Isaac worked side by side throughout the day, their new understanding adding a layer of awareness to every interaction. Their routine continued in the following days, but with subtle changes. A touch of hands when passing tools, lingering glances across the dinner table, conversations that stretched late into the evening. They were learning each other in a new way, navigating the shift from partnership to something deeper. As November settled over the territory, bringing shorter days and colder nights, Isaac began spending more evenings in the main house. They would sit by the fire after dinner, reading or talking or simply enjoying each other's company. Sometimes Catherine would play the small piano that had been her one extravagance when they'd moved west, and Isaac would listen, his expression peaceful. One such evening, as the wind howled outside and snow fell steadily, Catherine finished playing a melancholy piece by Chopin. When she turned from the piano, she found Isaac watching her with such tenderness that her breath caught. "You play beautifully," he said. "I never had much schooling in music, but I know what moves me." Catherine smiled, coming to sit beside him on the sofa. "My mother insisted on lessons from the time I was 6. I hated it then, but I'm grateful now. It brings me comfort." Isaac put his arm around her shoulders and she leaned into his warmth. These moments of physical closeness still felt new and precious. "Tell me more about your family," he said. "You've mentioned your sister in Philadelphia, but not much else." Catherine settled against him, remembering, "My parents were both teachers, very proper, very devoted to education. They were disappointed when I married Thomas so young." "How did you meet him?" "He delivered goods to the school where I taught, Books, paper, supplies from his father's store. She smiled at the memory. He was so persistent in his courting, I turned him down twice before agreeing to a proper outing. Isaac chuckled. I can't imagine anyone turning you down. I was very focused on my career, she explained. Teaching was important to me, but Thomas. She sighed. He had such dreams, such conviction, he made me believe in possibilities I hadn't considered. Like moving west, Isaac supplied. Yes, my parents were horrified. My sister Clara cried for days. Catherine's expression grew thoughtful. I write to her regularly, but she's never visited. The idea of the wild frontier terrifies her. And you, were you terrified? Sometimes, she admitted. The first winter was brutal. I'd never experienced such isolation, such harsh conditions. But there was also a freedom I'd never known in Philadelphia, a chance to define ourselves beyond society's expectations. Isaac nodded in understanding. That's what brought me west initially. After Sarah died, Kansas held too many memories. Out here, a man is judged by his actions, not his past. Do you ever think of going back east? Catherine asked. No, he said without hesitation. This is home now. His arm tightened slightly around her, more so than ever. Catherine turned to look up at him, touched by the implication. For me as well. Their kiss was deeper this time, less tentative. Catherine felt a longing stir within her that had been dormant since Thomas's death. When they finally separated, both were breathing unevenly. I should go, Isaac said reluctantly, glancing toward the windows where snow was building up against the glass. Before the storm gets worse. Catherine hesitated, then gathered her courage. Stay, she said softly. The cabin will be freezing and it's only getting colder. Isaac's eyes searched hers, understanding the invitation for what it was. Are you certain? She nodded, her heart racing. I'm certain. He kissed her again, tenderly but with a new urgency that made her pulse quicken. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Catherine, he said simply. I think I have since that day by the grave when you stood so brave and alone in the rain. Tears pricked at her eyes. I love you too, she whispered, the words both frightening and liberating. I didn't expect to, but I do. That night, as the storm raged outside, they found warmth and comfort in each other's arms. Catherine's last thought before sleep claimed her was that Thomas would understand, would want her to find happiness again. For the first time, the thought brought peace rather than guilt. Morning came with brilliant sunshine that made the snow-covered landscape sparkle like diamonds. Catherine woke to find Isaac already up, stoking the fire in the bedroom hearth. He turned at her movement, a smile spreading across his face. Good morning, he said, coming to sit on the edge of the bed. Sleep well, Catherine reached for his hand. Better than I have in months. The intimacy between them felt natural, as if they had crossed a threshold into a new understanding. They moved through the morning routine with a comfortable familiarity, preparing breakfast together, discussing the day's tasks. When Isaac kissed her goodbye before heading out to check the cattle, there was a possessive quality to it that made Catherine's heart swell. This was no longer just a partnership of convenience or even friendship. It was something far more profound. The weeks that followed brought a deepening of their relationship in all aspects. Isaac moved from the cabin to the main house, and they began to truly build a life together. The ranch prospered under their joint care, and as Christmas approached, Catherine found herself happier than she had believed possible after Thomas's death. One evening in mid-December, they sat by the fire after dinner. Outside, snow was falling gently, adding to the substantial accumulation of the past weeks. Isaac had been unusually quiet during the meal, and Catherine sensed he had something on his mind. Is everything all right? She asked, setting aside her knitting. You seem preoccupied. Isaac looked up from the book he hadn't really been reading. Just thinking. He closed the book and set it aside, turning to face her fully. About us, about the future, Catherine felt a flutter of anticipation. What about the future? Isaac took a deep breath. I know we've only known each other for less than a year. I know you're still healing from losing Thomas, but these past months have shown me what I want for the rest of my life. He reached for her hands. "I want to build something lasting with you, Catherine. Not just as business partners, but as husband and wife." Although she had sensed where the conversation was heading, the actual proposal still took her breath away. "Isaac, you don't have to answer now," he said quickly. "I know it might seem too soon. But I wanted you to know how I feel, what I hope for." Catherine squeezed his hands, tears gathering in her eyes. "It's not too soon," she said softly. "Not when you're as certain as I am." Hope bloomed in his expression. "Does that mean—" "Yes," she interrupted, smiling through her tears. "Yes, I will marry you, Isaac Garrett." His face transformed with joy, and he pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left her breathless. When they finally separated, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I promise to honor your past," he said quietly. "Thomas will always be part of your history, part of what made you who you are. I would never ask you to forget him." Catherine's heart swelled with gratitude and love. "And I will honor your past," she replied. "Sarah will always be part of what brought you to me." They were married on New Year's Day, 1877, in the small church in Silver Creek. The weather cooperated with clear skies and sunshine that made the snow glitter. Catherine wore a deep blue dress she had ordered from Helena, with a simple veil her sister had sent from Philadelphia, along with her regrets that the journey was too difficult to make in winter. The townspeople turned out for the ceremony, curiosity mingling with genuine good wishes. Even Mrs. Porter seemed grudgingly supportive, especially after learning that Isaac and Catherine had paid off their mortgage and expanded their herd significantly. Harold Simmons was noticeably absent, having largely avoided them since their confrontation at the bank. Rumor had it that the railroad had chosen a different route, bypassing Silver Creek entirely and leaving Simmons's land speculation schemes in ruins. As they exchanged their vows, Catherine felt a sense of completion that she hadn't expected. She would always carry Thomas in her heart, but loving Isaac didn't diminish that memory. Instead, it honored the capacity for love that Thomas had helped nurture in her. The celebration afterward was modest but joyful, with music and dancing in the church hall. As Isaac led Catherine in their first dance as husband and wife, she caught glimpses of their future in his eyes, children perhaps, the ranch growing and prospering, a life built on mutual respect and deep affection. "Happy, Mrs. Garrett?" he asked, his voice low and intimate despite the crowded room. "Very happy, Mr. Garrett," she replied, her smile radiant. When they returned to the ranch that evening, Isaac surprised her by carrying her across the threshold in the traditional manner, making her laugh with delight. "Welcome home, wife," he said, setting her gently on her feet in the parlor. Catherine looked around the room that had witnessed so much of her life, her initial years with Thomas, her grief after his death, and now the beginning of this new chapter with Isaac. The ranch house had evolved from Thomas's dream to their shared reality. "It feels right," she said, leaning into Isaac's embrace. "All of it." Later that night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness, Catherine thought about the strange, winding path that had brought them to this moment. Had someone told her on that rainy day at Thomas's grave that she would find love again within the year, she would never have believed it. "What are you thinking about?" Isaac asked, his voice drowsy. Catherine turned in his arms to face him. "About the day we met. About how you said I didn't have to be brave that night." He brushed a strand of hair from her face tenderly. "I remember. You gave me permission to grieve," she said softly, "and in doing so you helped me begin to heal." Isaac kissed her forehead. "You were already healing yourself. I just walked beside you for a while. And now we walk forward together," he said simply. Catherine rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Outside, snow began to fall again, blanketing the ranch in pristine white, while inside, warmth and love created a sanctuary against the winter's chill. Spring came early that year, bringing new growth to the ranch and new possibilities. Catherine and Isaac expanded their operation, adding sheep to diversify their income and hiring additional hands to manage the increased workload. The partnership that had begun as a practical arrangement had evolved into a true marriage in every sense, their personal and professional lives intertwined seamlessly. In late March, as the last patches of snow melted and the first wildflowers began to appear on the hillsides, Catherine received a letter from her sister Clara announcing her intention to visit during the summer months. "She's finally coming," Catherine told Isaac over breakfast, excitement in her voice. "After all these years of promising." Isaac smiled at her enthusiasm. "That's wonderful. It will be good for you to see her again. She says she's curious to meet the man who captured her wild Western sister's heart," Catherine read from the letter, laughing. "I hope I meet with her approval," Isaac said, only half joking. He knew how important family ties were to Catherine, especially since losing Thomas. "She'll love you," Catherine assured him, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. How could she not? As spring turned to early summer, Catherine found herself experiencing unexpected fatigue and occasional morning sickness. At first, she attributed it to the increased workload of the busy season, but as the symptoms persisted, a hopeful suspicion began to form. She confirmed her pregnancy with the doctor in Silver Creek in early June, just 2 weeks before Clara was due to arrive. The news filled her with a mixture of joy and trepidation. At 25, she was young enough for a healthy pregnancy, but she couldn't help worrying about all the things that could go wrong in the relatively isolated setting of their ranch. When she told Isaac that evening, his reaction dispelled any lingering concerns. His face lit with such profound happiness that Catherine felt tears spring to her eyes. "A baby," he said in wonder, placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Our child. Are you pleased?" She asked, though his expression made the question almost unnecessary. "Pleased doesn't begin to describe it," he replied, pulling her into his arms. "I never thought I'd have the chance to be a father after Sarah died." He trailed off, emotion making his voice rough. "This is a blessing, Catherine. The greatest gift." They agreed to wait until after Clara's visit to share the news with others, wanting to tell her sister in person. When Clara arrived by stagecoach in mid-June, Catherine was struck by how little she had changed, still prim and proper in her Eastern fashions, still viewing the Western territory with a mixture of fascination and horror. "My goodness, Kathy," Clara exclaimed as they drove from town to the ranch. "How do you bear the vastness of it all?" "There's simply nothing for miles," Catherine exchanged an amused glance with Isaac, who was driving the wagon. "That's precisely what I love about it," she replied. "The space, the freedom, it's never felt empty to me, just open with possibility." Clara looked skeptical but patted her sister's hand affectionately. "You always did have an unconventional streak. Even as a child, you were the one climbing trees while I practiced my needlework." Isaac chuckled. "That doesn't surprise me in the least." Clara studied him with undisguised curiosity. Though initially reserved, she had warmed to Isaac quickly during their introductions in town. "You found yourself quite the husband, Kathy. Mother and father would be speechless." "Is that approval I hear, Clara?" Catherine teased. Her sister sniffed, but her expression was warm. "Let's call it recognition that perhaps your impulsiveness occasionally leads to favorable outcomes." By the time they reached the ranch, Catherine was certain that Clara and Isaac would get along well. Her sister's obvious delight in the comfortable, well-maintained home further assured Catherine that the visit would be a success. That evening, after a hearty dinner that showcased Catherine's improved cooking skills, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Clara had changed from her traveling clothes into a more comfortable dress, and with her hair loosened from its severe style, she looked younger and more relaxed. "I must admit, Kathy, you've created a lovely life here," she said, sipping the coffee Isaac had brought out. "It's not what I expected at all," Catherine smiled. "What did you expect? A crude cabin with dirt floors?" "Something like that," Clara admitted. "Your letters painted a positive picture, of course, but I assumed you were glossing over the hardships." "Oh, there are hardships," Isaac said. Brutal winters, drought in summer, problems with the herd, equipment breaking at the worst possible times. But there's satisfaction in overcoming those challenges. Clara nodded thoughtfully. I can see that, and you two certainly seem harmonious together. She hesitated. I hope it's not improper to say, but I was worried when you wrote about remarrying so soon after Thomas's death. It seemed hasty. Catherine glanced at Isaac, who gave her an encouraging nod. Life moves at a different pace out here, Clara. When you find something good, you don't question the timing. Besides, Isaac added, some things are meant to be, regardless of conventional timelines. Clara studied them both. You're happy, that's clear enough. I'm glad for it, truly. She paused. Though I still wish you lived closer to civilization. Catherine laughed, then decided the moment was right. Actually, Clara, we have some news that might make you wish even more that we lived closer to Philadelphia. Her sister looked puzzled. What news? I'm expecting a baby, Catherine said, unable to keep the joy from her voice. In early January, Clara's expression transformed from confusion to delight. A baby, oh Kathy, she rose to embrace her sister warmly. How wonderful. You're going to be a mother. And Isaac a father, Catherine added, reaching for her husband's hand. Clara turned to Isaac, her reservations fully melted away. Congratulations to you both, this is the most splendid news. They spent the rest of the evening discussing the baby, with Clara offering advice from her friend's experiences and promising to send baby clothes and supplies from Philadelphia. By the time they retired for the night, Catherine felt a new closeness with her sister that had been missing for years. The rest of Clara's visit passed quickly, filled with tours of the ranch, trips to Silver Creek, and long conversations catching up on family news. By the time she departed in early July, Clara had extracted promises of frequent letters about the pregnancy and an invitation to return when the baby was born. Take care of my sister and that precious baby, she told Isaac as she boarded the stagecoach. I expect to be an aunt who is lavishly informed of every milestone. You have my word, Isaac promised, clearly amused by Clara's authoritative manner. As summer progressed, Catherine's pregnancy became more visible, and they shared the news with their neighbors and the townspeople. The ranch continued to prosper, and they began planning adaptations to the house for the baby's arrival. Isaac was attentive and protective, sometimes to the point of hovering, which both touched and occasionally frustrated Catherine. After one evening when he insisted on completing a simple task that she was perfectly capable of handling, she confronted him gently. Isaac, I appreciate your concern, but I'm pregnant, not incapacitated, she said as they prepared for bed. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, many of them while working right up until delivery. Isaac looked chagrined. I know, I'm being overprotective. Yes, you are, she agreed, but softened it with a smile, though it comes from a good place. He sat on the edge of the bed, his expression turning serious. I lost Sarah to childbed fever, he said quietly. The baby came early and neither of them survived. I couldn't do anything but watch it happen. Understanding dawned and Catherine sat beside him, taking his hand. I didn't realize. You've never talked about how she died. It's not something I like to remember, he squeezed her fingers. I know times have changed, medicine has improved, and you're strong, healthier than Sarah ever was, but I can't help worrying. Catherine leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. It's all right to worry, just don't wrap me in cotton wool for the next 5 months. He chuckled, the tension breaking. I'll try to restrain myself. As autumn painted the landscape in gold and crimson, Catherine's belly grew rounder and the baby's movements became strong enough for Isaac to feel. The first time the child kicked against his palm, his expression of wonder moved Catherine to tears. That's our child, he whispered, awestruck. Our son or daughter? What do you hope for? She asked. A boy or a girl? Isaac considered the question seriously. Either would be a blessing. A son to teach ranching, a daughter to wrap around my finger, he smiled. What about you? The same, Catherine replied. Though I confess a small preference for a girl, I'd love to teach her to read and play piano. We could have both eventually, Isaac suggested. A whole brood of little Garretts running around the ranch. The image warmed Catherine's heart. After years of believing her dream of motherhood had died with Thomas, this second chance felt miraculous. Winter arrived early that year, with the first heavy snow falling in mid-November. Catherine, now in her 7th month, found herself increasingly housebound as the weather worsened. Isaac ensured she had plenty of books, fabric for sewing baby clothes, and regular visits from friends to ward off isolation. As Christmas approached, they decorated the house more elaborately than ever before, anticipating both the holiday and the baby's arrival the following month. Isaac cut a small pine from their property and brought it inside, where Catherine adorned it with ornaments she had ordered from Helena and paper decorations they made together in the evenings on Christmas Eve. A blizzard raged outside, but inside their home, all was warm and peaceful. They exchanged simple gifts: a new watch for Isaac, a silver hairbrush for Catherine, and together, a handcrafted cradle that Isaac had been working on secretly for months. "It's beautiful," Catherine said, running her hand over the smooth wood. "Did you make this yourself?" "With some help from Jenkins on the carving," Isaac admitted. "He's handy with detail work." Catherine examined the delicate patterns carved into the headboard, intertwined leaves and flowers surrounding a small heart. "It's perfect. The baby will love it." "I hope so." Isaac placed his hand on her rounded belly, feeling the now familiar movements of their child. Not much longer now. New Year's Day of 1878 dawned clear and brutally cold. Catherine, enormous and uncomfortable, had begun to experience irregular contractions the previous evening. By mid-morning, it was clear that the baby was coming, earlier than expected but not dangerously so. Isaac rode to town through the snow to fetch the doctor, returning with both the physician and the midwife who often assisted him. Catherine was grateful for their presence, especially as the labor intensified throughout the day. As the sun began to set, casting long blue shadows across the snow, Catherine's pains came closer together. The midwife declared that delivery was imminent, and Isaac was ushered from the room despite his protests. The next hours were a blur of pain and effort for Catherine. She drew on reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed, focusing on the midwife's calm instructions and the doctor's reassuring presence. As midnight approached, with a final tremendous push, her child entered the world, a girl, the midwife announced triumphantly. "A beautiful, healthy girl." Catherine fell back against the pillows, exhausted but elated. When the tiny, red-faced infant was placed in her arms, cleaned and swaddled, she felt a surge of love so powerful it took her breath away. "Let Isaac in," she requested, her voice weak but determined. "Let him meet his daughter." Isaac entered cautiously, his face drawn with worry that transformed into awe when he saw Catherine holding their child. He approached the bed slowly, as if afraid they might disappear. "You have a daughter," Catherine told him, smiling despite her exhaustion. Isaac sat carefully on the edge of the bed, staring at the tiny face visible among the blankets. "She's perfect," he whispered, reaching out to touch the baby's cheek with a gentle finger. "Just like her mother." The doctor assured them that both mother and child were doing well, and after providing instructions for Catherine's recovery, he and the midwife departed, promising to return the next day to check on the new family. Alone with his wife and newborn daughter, Isaac seemed overwhelmed with emotion. "What shall we name her?" he asked, carefully taking the baby when Catherine offered her. They had discussed names but hadn't settled on final choices. Now, looking at their daughter's face, Catherine knew. "Sarah," she said softly. "Sarah Thomas Garrett." Isaac's eyes filled with tears. "Are you sure?" Catherine nodded. "To honor both of them, the ones who brought us to each other in their own way." Isaac bent to kiss her, his gratitude evident in the gentle press of his lips. "It's perfect. She's perfect. You're perfect." As the new day began, the first of 1878, and the first of their daughter's life, Catherine felt a profound sense of completion. The journey that had begun in grief at Thomas's graveside had led her here, to this moment of purest joy. Isaac settled into the chair beside the bed, cradling their daughter with a tenderness that made Catherine's heart swell. "I never thought I could be this happy again," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "After Sarah died, I thought that part of my life was over." "I felt the same after losing Thomas," Catherine replied. "It seemed impossible that there could be anything beyond the grief. And yet here we are." Isaac looked from their daughter to his wife, love evident in every line of his face. "It's like a miracle." "No," Catherine disagreed gently. "Not a miracle. Just life with all its unexpected turns, all its second chances." Outside, stars glittered in the clear winter sky above their ranch, the home they had built together, where their daughter would grow, where their future would unfold day by day. The past was honored and remembered, but it no longer cast a shadow over the present. As baby Sarah drifted to sleep in her father's arms, Catherine closed her eyes, content in the knowledge that what had once seemed an ending had been merely a beginning in disguise. Her husband's grave would always be part of her story, but it was no longer the defining chapter. Now, surrounded by the family she and Isaac had created, Catherine understood that courage took many forms: the bravery to grieve, to continue to love again. And she had found all three.